Hello and welcome to Missouri Legislative Update. This month we bring you our show from the floor of the Missouri House of Representatives. In today's show we preview the upcoming veto session and several other legislative topics. I'm Jonathan Lorenz reporting for the Missouri House of Representatives.
And reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Jennifer Yapel. Since our last program, the 2013 fiscal year began. We reached the deadline for the governor to approve or veto measures delivered to him by the General Assembly, and most legislation signed by the governor has now become law. Here's a look at some of those bills. Lawmakers passed measures during the 2012 legislative session designed to promote higher education, protect those in houses of worship, create crimes against those who abuse members of our state's elderly and disabled population, and standardize yellow light interval times around the Show Me State. Senate Bill 563, sponsored by Senator Bob Dixon of Springfield, started out as legislation designed to correct a conflict regarding term limits for the Board of Governors at Missouri State University. However, it turned into an omnibus bill making several changes to education in Missouri.
It actually grew into a larger bill, like many bills do, but in the end we had, I think, a very solid bill that strengthens our education system and makes for a stronger economy, whether it means providing quality education for workforce for tomorrow or providing support for those entrepreneurs and innovators today.
Another provision found within Senate Bill 563 was initially filed as a separate measure sponsored by Senator Timothy Green of Spanish Lake. His act creates the Higher Education Capital Fund.
I think it is a tool in a toolbox that the higher education institutions and the Coordinating Board of Higher Education can use in these tough times of trying to find revenues to renovate, not even build, but to renovate buildings.
More specifically, Senator Green's provision allows the General Assembly to provide matching funds through the appropriations process to public colleges or universities to build and renovate certain buildings on campus. Also enacted into law is a bill that creates the House of Worship Protection Act. Sponsored by the Senate President Pro Tem, Senate Bill 755 creates the crime of disturbing a house of worship if an individual intentionally disturbs a building used for a religious purpose by using profanity, rude or indecent behavior, or making noise. Legislation that addresses a gray area of Missouri law recently took effect, protecting members of the elderly and disabled community in Missouri. Senate Bill 689 adds undue influence, using authority over an elderly or disabled person to take unfair advantage of that individual, to the types of acts that constitute a crime of financial exploitation. And finally, Senate Bill 611 creates consistency for traffic lights across the Show Me State. The Missouri Department of Transportation is responsible for establishing a minimal yellow light change interval time for traffic lights based on nationally recognized standards. In addition, drivers on Missouri roads are now required to change lanes, if possible, when approaching MoDOT vehicles that display amber and white lights, in addition to other emergency vehicles. The governor gave his approval to nearly 100 measures passed by the General Assembly during the 2012 legislative session, many of which were enacted into law on August 28th. To see a complete list of these measures, visit www.senate.mo.gov and click on the Governor's Action link under the Legislation tab. Missouri's Constitution gives the governor the option to veto measures passed by the General Assembly. This year, the governor vetoed 14 measures, including Senate Bill 749. Senate Communications correspondent Brad Bayshore has more.
One of the most high-profile bills to receive the governor's veto was Senate Bill 749, sponsored by Senator John Lamping of Ladue. The measure was filed in direct response to federal guidelines regarding the Patient and Affordable Care Act passed by Congress and signed into law by the President in 2010. The bill's sponsor says it could protect employers and healthcare providers from being forced to offer certain healthcare services that are contrary to certain religious beliefs, most notably sterilization, contraception, and abortion. In his veto message to lawmakers, the governor indicated Missouri law already contains protections for the religious beliefs of employers and employees, making Senate Bill 749 unnecessary. Senator Lamping disagrees with the governor's action and says the measure could provide alternative options for groups seeking medical coverage that aligns with their religious and moral beliefs.
Nowhere in Missouri code is sterilization defined, or nowhere in Missouri code is that something that employers and employees can object to. At best, there's kind of a nuanced way in which employers' rights are protected, but 749 not only brought new things to bear, it also clearly articulated the rights of employers and employees.
During floor debate, certain members of the minority party, including Senator Jolie Justice of Kansas City, discussed concerns about the measure before the bill was approved by the Senate.
The definition of sterilization is not where the insurance department would like it, because it's not, the elective language that's in there is not defined the way that it should be. Second, I am concerned, as are the insurance companies that are standing out in the halls, that we may be setting up a situation where they are going to be in trouble with the feds if they do one thing, and they're going to be in trouble with the state if they don't do the other.
Majority party members in both chambers have signaled they could attempt an override of the veto during the veto session held in mid-September, a move that requires a two-thirds majority vote from each chamber. Reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Brad Bayshore.
Of the 14 bills vetoed by the governor this year, only 13 are up for consideration during this year's veto session. One of these measures includes legislation to change Missouri's statutes on rabies vaccinations. Senate Communications correspondent Daniel Clote has more.
According to the Missouri Department of Health, there were 29 confirmed cases of rabies last year in Missouri, with bats and skunks the most common carriers of the virus. Thanks to widespread vaccination by pet owners, which is required in most states, rabies incidents among domestic animals are fairly rare. Missouri, however, has no such requirement at the state level. To address the issue, Senator Dan Brown of Rolla sponsored Senate Bill 566 this year, which would have required pet owners to vaccinate their pets against rabies. Speaking to the Senate Agriculture Committee, Senator Brown explained the need for the requirement.
You know, most municipalities and some counties actually have ordinances that regulate this and already have it stated. This does not supersede those requirements. In outstate Missouri and some of our smaller counties, there's no guidance and no rules and regulations that law enforcement and veterinarians practicing in those counties really have to go by, and it gets to be quite a problem.
The bill was widely supported. As it went through the legislative process, however, it changed dramatically. By the time the General Assembly approved the measure in May, the legislation no longer required pet owners to vaccinate their cats and dogs. Instead, the bill revamped existing laws on how authorities deal with an animal suspected of having rabies. Under the version of Senate Bill 566 passed by the legislature, pet owners who could not provide documentation their animal was vaccinated would have to surrender it to a licensed veterinarian, who would then decide whether or not to euthanize the animal for further testing. In contrast, current Missouri law uses a multidisciplinary approach to determine the best course. Veterinarians, epidemiologists, and medical doctors discuss each individual case and take into account both the health of the patient and the condition of the animal. In July, the governor vetoed the bill, claiming there was no compelling justification for disrupting the system already provided for in Missouri law. Lawmakers will have the option of overturning the veto in September during the annual veto session. We'll bring you more on the veto session in the next episode of Missouri Legislative Update. Reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Daniel Clote.
Coming up next on Missouri Legislative Update, lawmakers continue their work during the interim by meeting in committees and traveling around the world to learn more about issues that affect Missourians back at home. That and more after the break.
I am a teenager.
I am online.
I enjoy sharing thoughts,
music, videos,
ideas, information.
I will not
be a victim to threats,
to stalking, to soliciting, to predators.
I will be responsible.
I will be careful.
I will be honest.
I will be smarter. I will get my parents involved.
I will protect myself.
I will be safe.
I am a teenager.
And I
will not
be bullied.
nutrition can lead to great things. Find out how a healthy lifestyle can help your child succeed.
So you're the new girl.
Yes.
That's cute.
Go on in. Mr. Felsmikoff, thank you for overlooking my credit score. I was in college and I charged up a whole bunch of things that I really couldn't afford. Who knew employers checked that?
Hey, kid, I don't credit check you. You don't credit check me. Capiche? And sometimes it floods in here. You might want to start wearing boots.
Potential employers can check your credit. Don't let your bad credit put you in a bad job.
If a natural disaster happened and we were outside the home, we'd probably all meet, I'll say, around the grocery store, you know.
We would all meet at a bus stop. That is our meeting place.
Well, we would probably just meet out in front of the house.
Oh, we'd probably meet at our neighbor's house.
If you have no plan, then you can just plan what to do as it happens.
Welcome back. Lawmakers returned to the state capitol to begin work on an interim committee looking at the state's purchasing process. In this next story, we take a look at the committee and how it hopes to review the state's bidding and contracting processes.
Are almost always in the negotiations.
The House Interim Committee on Government Bidding and Contracting met for the first time following the end of the 2012 legislative session. During its first hearing, the committee met with representatives from the Office of Administration to better understand the state's processes and procedures when it comes to purchasing goods and services. The committee also learned about the state's process of bidding out contracts to private groups. According to the chairman, the committee isn't intended to specifically target one state department.
This is not a witch hunt, but on the other hand, we're not going to be following every little rabbit down every little hole.
The committee plans to meet at least 4 more times during the interim to meet with other state departments.
Some Missouri lawmakers take a long journey in the hopes of reopening an old export route. Senate Communications correspondent Dean Morgan takes a closer look.
Senator Jolie Justice of Kansas City was part of a recent delegation that visited the Taiwanese government. She says the June trip stemmed from a ban on imported U.S. beef, which has had implications on Missouri farmers.
We went with the Midwestern Taiwanese Cultural and Economic Office that they have. It's based out of Kansas City, and it represents several states in the Midwest. We had a senator and a representative from North Dakota, a senator and a representative from South Dakota, a senator from Nebraska, and then I went along with Representative Denny Hoskins from Warrensburg.
Senator Justice says beef has not been allowed to be imported to Taiwan from the United States for several years.
The reason that they didn't come to a vote was quite interesting. It wasn't a filibuster like we see in the Missouri Senate, but the minority party actually physically camped out around the dais and would not let the majority party assume the dais, which meant that they could not call the legislature into session, which means they couldn't come to a vote.
During her trip, which was paid for by the Taiwanese government, Senator Justice describes a surprise disruption.
In the end, the special session did not end up taking place because another thing that happened while we were there is that the island was hit by a typhoon, and typhoon days are very similar to snow days, extreme snow days in the United States. Typhoons shut everything down, and so the legislature did not go into session that day because of a typhoon, and everybody had to stay indoors.
Senator Justice says the ban on imported U.S. beef started with a mad cow scare.
Because it takes a legislative fix to change their restrictions, it's unfortunately become political, wants the majority party to have difficulties in their trade relations with the United States. And so that has any concerns about American beef anymore. It's still a political hot potato. And we see that obviously in the United States.
In late July, the Taiwanese legislature passed a new law allowing beef exports to return from the United States, which will take effect in mid-September. Reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Dean Morgan.
During the mid-September veto session, the Senate will say goodbye to several retiring and retired senators. Senate Communications correspondent Brad Bayshore has more on the retiring class of 2012.
As you leave here today and head back to your districts, know that you have served the people of Missouri well.
The Senate will say goodbye to 3 retired and 11 retiring senators in September. Term limits are the result of most of these lawmakers leaving the upper chamber. Senate Minority Floor Leader Victor Callahan of Independence made a few closing remarks during the last day of the regular session by reminding his colleagues to work together in the future.
We've gone through a particularly tumultuous session this session, but we survived it. Learn something from that. Learn that sometimes that one issue or that thing that some other politician in the other body wants does not rise to the level to divide us. That ultimately we are a Senate that can work through our differences.
Retiring Senator Jack Goodman of Mount Vernon thanked his colleagues for their service to the state and for the relationships formed by lawmakers through working together over the years.
It's been a joy to work with 33 great people, very different people, but some wonderful people. And we get to see so much of the truth in each other in this job. And I thank you for being a part of this time in your lives and getting to know you and see you and respect you. And I look forward to the friendship that will endure as we go forward.
Lawmakers will return to the Capitol in September for their annual veto session. While in Jefferson City, both chambers will use this time to celebrate their careers and say goodbye to their colleagues and friends. We'll bring you more on these retirement ceremonies in our next episode. Reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Brad Bayshore.
Up next on Missouri Legislative Update, the Missouri House inducts a radio pioneer into the state's hallowed halls, and we take a look at a new development at the state capitol. That and more after the break on Missouri Legislative Update.
Every year, mothers lose their babies to gun crimes. You'll always be your mother's baby. So before you commit a gun crime, think about who you'll leave behind. Gun crimes hit home.
I'm starving. What's for breakfast?
Guten Tag!
Johannes, Franz!
I bring you arts-enriched Raisinblams, fortified with increased test scores and creative problem-solving skills.
It's good!
And good for you. Bobby? Susie? Don't worry, that's just the power of the art!
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit AmericansForTheArts.org.
The first step to getting into college is finding someone who can help. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
Welcome back. Speaker Steve Tilley inducted radio commentator Rush Limbaugh into the Hall of Famous Missourians. In this next story, we take a look at the sights and sounds of the induction ceremony.
Unfortunately, there are only
Speaker Steve Tilley inducted conservative radio host Rush Limbaugh into the Hall of Famous Missourians. The speaker unveiled the bust in front of lawmakers and other well-wishers in the House chamber. Born in Cape Girardeau, Limbaugh's daily radio show now appears on more than 650 radio stations, and several people have credited his radio show with saving the AM dial from extinction. Limbaugh isn't just known for his radio show. Over the years, he has raised more than $30 million for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Despite being controversial, the speaker claims Limbaugh belongs in the Hall of Famous Missourians.
He may say things that strike a nerve. He's right most of the time. He even may say things that I disagree with from time to time. But that doesn't undo everything he's accomplished in his career. And it doesn't provide a reasonable excuse why he shouldn't be honored by his home state for his many accomplishments.
According to the speaker, the inspiration behind the bust came from his father. The bust took more than 4 weeks to design and sculpt before it was cast in bronze. The sculptor claims his goal with the bust was to create a lasting image of Limbaugh.
I really wanted to create a portrait that no matter what you felt about Rush, you could walk up to the bust and say, that is the Rush that I know.
Limbaugh's bust now joins the likes of Walter Cronkite, Stan Musial, Dred Scott, and others in the Hall of Famous Missourians. If you have visited the Missouri State Capitol recently, you probably noticed a little bit of construction. In this next story, we take a look at the construction and why the state's crown jewel needed a minor facelift. Dust and the sounds of power drills fill the air as the Missouri Capitol receives a minor facelift. Construction crews hammer and work away as they renovate the steps on the west side of the Capitol. Drainage problems and erosion have caused the west steps over time to become structurally unsafe. The renovation has a price tag around $1.5 million. However, officials are confident it will be completed under budget. According to one House official, safety is the driving force behind the renovation.
The goal of the project is ultimately to provide better structural support on the west end of the building under legislative offices, under the Thomas Hart Benton Gallery, and areas of the Capitol just for pure safety and preservation purposes, but then additionally to also to kind of restore the original aesthetic look as best as possible to the Capitol building.
According to Crumblis, construction crews are working to closely match the color and makeup of the renovated steps with the rest of the Capitol building. Officials hope to have the renovated steps completed before the start of the 2013 legislative session. And that's our show for this month. If you have any questions regarding anything going on in the Missouri House, you can visit our website at www.house.mo.gov. I'm Jonathan Lorenz reporting for the Missouri House of Representatives.
And if you have any questions about the legislation in the Senate that appeared in this program, please visit www.senate.mo.gov. On this site, you can also find the contact information for the 34 members of the Missouri Senate, as well as a link to the Senate's newsroom website. I'm Jennifer Yapel reporting for the Missouri Senate. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time on Missouri Legislative Update.